Okay, so let's move on to the economic situation and the EU's response to Biden's Inflation Reduction Act.
Sure, sure. The first thing, let's just point out, just get this out of the way first, Mike. The Biden's Inflation Reduction Act has not reduced inflation; it's increased inflation. It's a bailout for all the green energy boondoggle projects to subsidize all of this side of the energy sector in hopes that it will also bring the price down. And it's done the opposite. It's driven the price up of green energy and just in energy in general, and created instability on the grids during a very cold winter, which we'll show in a minute here. But let's just rebrand that headline here, just so people know. The EU's will refashion that headline. The EU's response to their own failed green policies and suicidal anti-Russian sanctions. Okay, that's really what it is. So they're wanting Ursula von der Leyen, Brussels are wanting to be seen to be doing something. So they look over at the United States, this big symbolic move, the Inflation Reduction Act, a total failure, helping to bankrupt the government more. But here, this is what they're saying. The EU has announced plans to reduce restrictions on tax credits for renewable energy projects in response to Biden's Inflation Reduction Act, following mounting public pressure to expand its climate policy following the introduction of the new law. And the European Commission has stated that it aims to loosen state and aid rules to encourage greater investment in production facilities in the green energy industry. Whether any of that adds up economically, Mike, or makes sense, or whether these are giant subsidies in order to kickstart an industry that needs to be basically propped up forever, that's up for people to work out for themselves. But that's the end result. This is what happened in America. And the caveat here, however, this kind of major policy shift requires broad support from its 27 member states, which often slows down the introduction of new laws. So they're decrying democracy, what little democracy there is in the EU. You can see it's seen as an obstacle. It's seen as a hurdle to what the Germans or what the Nazis called Gleichschalten, which is a total uniformity of policy and thought right across the board. And isn't that what the European Union is all about under the Ursula von der Leyen regime? Yeah, it does look like that's the case, Mike. So, in terms of how this is going to affect our prices in Britain, in terms of energy, electricity, gas, I don't necessarily think this is good news, quite frankly, because they can't scare up energy out of thin air. All they can do is try to promote things. They're incentivizing bad behavior. Wind and solar do not perform, especially during the winter. And so instead of penalizing them and going for invest in other things that make more sense, like coal, like natural gas, or to open up the Nord Stream pipeline, no, they're subsidizing the one side of the energy sector that consistently underperforms. And even when they're down, they're still getting the subsidies to the wind industry. It's unbelievable. And I think the same thing has happened in Britain as well, Mike.
Yes. Well, let's bring the Daily Mail on screen and General Sir Richard Barnes. Now, before you comment on this, Patrick, we just need to put a little bit of context on General Sir Richard Barnes and make the point that he is best buddies with Chris Donnelly of the Institute for Statecraft. He is therefore pushing forward, and he works with Chris Donnelly, so he is pushing forward an integrity initiative, anti-Russia, absolutely anti-Russia view. So, however, he has joined the barrage of voices warning about the state of the British armed forces. Sorry.
So yeah, I agree with you 100%, Mike. I think the purpose of this story is to try to beat the drum for more money, more funding. And what is that really? That's the defense contractor industry lobbying. So this is the military working hand in hand with the press and the defense industry to try to raise those budgets and get those orders up here. So he's saying that the Britain would run out of ammo in a day if they fought Russia. Now, there's some context to this. It's not all inaccurate. It's true. And it should also just speak to the point of how could the government in Britain be so gung ho for a war threatening Russia, this strident talk, when they couldn't even, mount mass major combat operations and have it last for more than a day. It's kind of ridiculous on its face, but that kind of just speaks to the whole ridiculousness of a lot of NATO member states' orientation with regards to this Ukrainian conflict. But look at this. We just go back to 2021. They ran this war game here where the British Army ran out of ammunition in just 8 days for a 10-day online simulated war exercise. This was run by a member of the United States, Lieutenant General Ben Hodges, front ran this here. And so we'll look at the context of that here. And so that's, Mike, it's they don't really have the capability to go to war. And again, we've spoken about this before. What capability do they have at the end of the day? It's, special ops, sabotage, false flags, gangs and counter gangs. This is what Britain does really well historically, and it's probably what they're going to continue to do. And all of this conventional war beating of the drum is not going to make any difference to the conflict as it stands in Ukraine between Russia and the NATO-backed forces in Ukraine and all of our other various and sundry mercenaries and special forces running around in between.
But in the meantime, I mean, I have to say, this story did the rounds of various media. The headline here is "Furious Navy Chiefs Order Investigation After Workers on Trident Submarine Glued Broken Bolts in Nuclear Reactor Chamber." It's almost incredible to believe that has actually happened, but they say that it has. And if it has, that's a significant breakdown in, well, I mean, it seems like a desperate act for anybody to do such a thing.
Yeah, what does it say? You could translate that, Mike, as they're cutting corners, budgets are tight, they don't have the right personnel, they don't have the level of expertise or competency in key positions like engineering and maintenance. You're talking about the nuclear fleet as well. That's a big ticket item. This is a multi-billion pound item. And so if this isn't going to be looked after in the way that it should be on a base level, what on earth is Britain doing with a nuclear deterrent anyway?
Yeah.
That's the obvious question.
Yes. Okay, now let's just mention AUKUS. Let's remind everybody what AUKUS is. This is the partnership between the UK, the United States, and Australia. They signed it a couple of years ago. They signed this, what they described a landmark defense and security partnership that would defend our shared interests around the world. This is all about reorienting NATO towards the South China Sea, of course. And part and parcel of, well, we'll come on to what part and parcel of this was in a second, but AUKUS, Boris Johnson said at the time, will preserve security and stability around the world and will generate hundreds of high-skilled jobs as we level up, apparently highly skilled jobs, so that we can glue bolts together on nuclear submarines. But anyway, this is the nuclear submarine technology that we are giving to Australia under this deal, of course. The Chinese, naturally, at the time, were not terribly excited about it. The Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman at the time saying AUKUS risks severely damaging regional peace and intensifying the arms race. So why are we mentioning it now? Well, because Wednesday, yesterday, and today, the AUKMIN meeting for 2023 is happening. So we had the Deputy Prime Minister, Australian Deputy Prime Minister, and also the Australian Foreign Minister over visiting the UK, and there is Ben Wallace and James Cleverly greeting them. They were having a fun time in London on Wednesday, talking about all kinds of things. This is a historic opportunity for the three nations with like-minded allies and partners to protect shared values and promote security and prosperity in the Indo-Pacific region, is what the original statement said, and this follows on from it. But following that meeting in London on Wednesday, they then headed off to oh, sorry, I apologize. I've forgotten exactly where this is. But anyway, they were having a look at the various training that was going on. Australian troops training Ukrainian troops alongside UK troops and so on. So let's see who all was involved in this. I've completely lost the plot. But anyway, that was on Thursday. Then today they went on to Portsmouth for more meetings, and it was all very exciting for them. But here's the key point. The UK was giving the UK and the United States giving Australia nuclear-powered submarine technology. So we've got to remember they're not giving them nuclear weapons. It's just nuclear-powered submarine technology. And this was at the time, if you remember, that the French were trying to sell the Australians some diesel electric submarines. And so this didn't go down terribly well with the French. Now, the Australian delegation met with the French before they came to London earlier this week, and the AUKUS was not mentioned. The whole thing was quietly forgotten about and brushed under the carpet, but nonetheless still an issue there with respect to the relationship between Australia and France. But this AUKUS partnership, Patrick, as I say, about the reorientation of NATO towards the South China Sea, all about making sure that the war drums start beating in China's direction.
Sure, but Mike, you have to remember, NATO is a defensive organization. It's totally voluntary. You make it sound like that this is some kind of aggressive U.S. and British-led confab that's trying to incite war halfway across the world. You should know that it's just a defensive alliance.
Well, that's what they claim. But look, sorry, I found the section of text that I wanted to tell everybody about there when they were meeting the Ukrainian trainees on Salisbury Plain. Just because the number of countries involved in training the Ukrainians at the moment, just be interested in your thoughts on this. So it was involving forces, not only Australian troops, but also Canadian, Denmark, Finland, Sweden, Norway, New Zealand, Lithuania, and the Netherlands, all taking part in training Ukrainian troops on Salisbury Plain during this meeting. That's quite an international force they're trying to build up.
Yeah, it is, Mike. It also reminds me of other training that's gone on in various other conflict zones, where they pulled either militants, extremists, in some case terrorists, and are training them in NATO countries. And so what this does by pooling the countries to get everybody involved in this, it's like if you're going to rob a bank, you want to sort of have 5 or 6 people. Key people involved in the crime so that everybody will keep quiet if in fact that crime is later exposed. So this by pooling everybody and getting everyone's hands dirty in this dirty war that's shaping up to be a dirty war in Ukraine, then also that guarantees the silence of other member states, so they're not able to speak out politically in an independent way because they're actually involved in some very dirty ops or black ops in this case.
Yeah.
So that's one way you can also look at it.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that. Okay, Vanessa, let's bring you back on screen, and we'll talk about the OPCW, because the OPCW has released its third report on the alleged Duma chemical attack in Syria.
Yeah, I mean, this is just a heads up for people. I'm actually doing an interview with the Syrian ambassador to the OPCW in The Hague on Sunday to run through some of the information that has obviously been omitted from this investigation and identification team report. Of course, the IIT has been given the mandate by the aligned countries that have led the regime change war in Syria, using the chemical weapon canard as their justification for intervention, both political and economic and military, of course, by proxy, to overthrow the Syrian government and to destabilize the entire country. As I've said previously, occupying Syrian natural resources and destroying civilian infrastructure. Now, what is interesting about this IIT report, of course, they've now been given the mandate, which Russia has opposed, to attribute blame. And despite the coming forward of dissident OPCW inspectors who were the first on the ground in Duma and who have proven through their investigative work that it was not a chemical attack at all, and was obviously in that case not by the Syrian government. The event itself staged by the UK created white helmets. The testimony and witness statements were doctored. The entire report was basically nobbled by
Yeah.
The Western and cabal that have been trying to overthrow that report. Austria Foreign Affairs and Federation. One thing that I wanted to pick up out of that response, Mike, is the following statement referring to the white helmet. If you go
Right.
to the next
Yeah,
slide.
Vanessa, I'll read that because your connection's just breaking up a little bit here. So the statement says, white helmets brought the corpses of the alleged chemical weapons attack victims mentioned in the IIT report in advance from nearby territories. They had gunshot wounds and mine blast injuries while lacking any signs of exposure to chlorine.
Well, this is a new development, actually. This hasn't been mentioned at all previously, and we have to assume this is based on the possible exhumation of the actual victims of this staged event. And this is one of the questions that I'll be raising on Sunday as to whether the Syrian government has any details to hand of this, because this is quite a major development. This sheds again the white helmet staging of this event in a very poor light. Of course, Riem Delati, a BBC producer, has even publicly stated that the hospital scenes were staged. Now, if the hospital scenes were staged, then the latest scenes presumably were also staged. So what's happening now? I mean, the release of the IIT report now is interesting timing, of course, as the West is ramping up its rhetoric against Russia in Ukraine. There could be a number of reasons for this. It could be that they don't want attention brought to the IIT report because they know that it's on very shaky ground. It could also be that they want to increase the pressure on Russia by including Russia in the attribution of chemical weapon use. It could also be, of course, again, protectionism, because France, the UK, and the US were responsible for unlawful aggression against Damascus, against Syria, before the OPCW inspectors had even been able to enter the area where the event was alleged to have happened. So there's many kind of strings and you know, connections going on here. But the bottom line is the IIT has continued to shore up the OPCW narrative and to provide of the US.
Yeah, okay. Thank you for that.